Hey, Brandon.
Hi there, Nisha.
Are we planning on addressing all the concerns that came up with proposal D, E, and whatever else?
We do have some PRs that have been sitting out there for a while, haven't we?
Yeah. Um, so do we want to talk about that first?
I'm happy to go through some of those. I just threw the things that I put on the list just to make sure we didn't miss them. Let's see. I kind of want to knock out a quick demo of what we're doing first on E,
Yeah.
because I figure that might be an interesting thing to people. The other ones that I had on my list, they're small, can get pushed till later, no big deal there.
Okay.
So if you want to throw it in as like the second item for looking over some of this stuff, I'm good with that.
Hello, everyone.
Hey there, Jason.
Hi.
I can be note taker this time around.
You are
Thank
a good
you.
note taker. When the rest of us do it, it usually falls aside. When you do it, it actually happens.
That's really not fair, right? Because I'm the one who's like pushing. I don't know what happened last week. And then everyone on
No,
the other side of the world doesn't know what's happening either.
you can see what happened last week. We filed it in the note taker section.
Yeah, no, I guess last week was the exception, maybe. I don't know. Yeah,
It was chaos.
y'all can level up on your note taking, I'm sure.
We really should. I think when it was just all of us doing it live, we were too much in the code together to be like, oh, there's this other window we should be filling out. Shame on us. Anyway, it's a couple minutes after. It looks like we've got a decent enough quorum here. Let me go ahead and get some screens set up and I'll do a quick demo before we jump into some of the other questions and whatnot that we had. Won't take long at all, because all I was going to show is just two commands. But while I'm doing that, the two things I need to make sure I keep up are a couple of pages, because otherwise people start commenting and chatting. And if I don't open those up now, I completely miss it and forget it all. So yeah, let me throw a couple of quick examples here. If I do a quick artifact list command, I have artifacts. And this, if I check this repo right now, this is on the newer registry code out there. So I've got artifacts here for an artifact manifest, image manifest, another couple artifact manifest. We've got annotations, all those good details. And if I do I don't have any other tags. It's just the one tag. Take that latest thing out there if that's confusing anybody. I ignore it normally in my code. No other tags in that repo. So this is looking up through the API. Nothing else happening there. And if I go check one of these, let me actually go, yeah, this is a good example here. And I missed the C in my copy there. I've got a manifest. It's got some annotations on it. And if I say get the artifact on it, I can pull back the actual artifact content. And if I was to do like an artifact put, I can change this around. Hello, OCI. And then let's see, I'll change. I'm going to keep doing this as it's like a miscellaneous thing. It's just like a hello. only because I don't feel like quoting the string. I do change my media type here to the artifact manifest media type. And so when I do that, it pushes the other media type in there. And so if I do that, shame on me. What did I do wrong there? Did I forget? No. Blob unknown to registry. Who knows? Demo failed right when I'm in the middle of doing all this good stuff. So I'm not sure where that demo failed. I'll have to go through and do some debugging there. But trust me, it did actually work before this demo failed. So yeah, that stuff actually quasi works as long as I'm not doing that one error there. And just kind of want to show that we've got some code sitting out there where these things are up and running and actually going through and going up to a registry using the new API, using all those new fancy smancy things we're trying to work through. So any questions on what that looks like other than me getting the demo working later on next time?
Those example annotations, is that you're just showing that you can do that?
Yeah, I don't have to put any annotations on there. I just want to do that. It's more just so that I can see them when they start to bubble up. So it's there on the manifest itself, and then I can see it when I do the query itself. So if I was to do the list command again, this is the actual raw JSON that comes back to me. And so the annotations are actually getting bubbled up. So that's kind of the nice thing that I like to see in there. Because I figure that's going to be useful when we're starting to push a whole bunch of these things up and we want to sort out who's got what where. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Otherwise, feel free to play with it and let me know what other parts of my demo that I've got broken and we can get that sorted out.
I have a question.
Sure.
How many changes did you have to make on top of the distribution fork in order to make this happen?
So Reg Client itself had some code in there for pushing artifacts before, but they were all tagged artifacts. They didn't have the reference type code. So I had to put some extra code in there to check. Adding a new media type, that took a fair bit of work because I've got a lot of wrappers around all that every time I add a media type in there. But adding the actual push by reference, it was just a quick check to the registry. Is the reference enabled there? So I kind of did a quick ping. And then if the reference API was available on the registry, then I just push it up untagged. If it wasn't available, then I'd generate the tag and push it with that tag now.
Okay, so you would say that the changes to the registry were reasonable.
Yeah, this was on the Reg client side. These were all changes to Reg client from client side. Registry side, I'll leave Sajay up to say how it was on his part of it. But yeah, in terms of actually implementing this, it wasn't too bad. Sajay, I see you came off mute.
Yeah, so we had the change to support only the new manifest first, and over the last week, we Akash from my team actually helped kind of support the image manifest as well. It is significant in the sense that it will take time to get this right, because it's actually going through every manifest and hoisting annotations and building the responses accordingly. So changes, I wouldn't say are trivial, but it's doable. But then again, the whole idea of the working group is so that we can see these experiences and see whether they fit the use cases that we want, right?
Yep. And I would say probably the harder part of the conversion is going to be cloud registries that have content that they need to re-index and get some of this stuff pulled up. And so we're probably hitting the easier part of the equation right now. Cool. Well, I don't want to take up all the time on this. I just want to show that it did exist. And so do we want to dig through some of the feedback on proposals D&E next? Chris, I see you're here. Do you want to lead that conversation?
Yeah, we can jump into that. I know Tonis is yours too. So we'd started having a conversation on the, let me pull it up. This is the the issue, and let me see if I can get it from, well, here's the full issue. There's a whole conversation on there. I think some of that is just explaining where we think there could be issues with this approach, or where things will be, where, you know, on paper they may look equivalent or may seem similar, but in practice on registries there may be performance issues or other things. So I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read all of that yet.
I did not actually.
I'm not sure what the best way. Thomas, what do you think the best way to handle this is? Maybe if people read from here-ish, but that's probably not good to do in a synchronous meeting.
You want to throw up a quick summary of your key concerns?
I think there's a couple. So the first one is that in the meta, in my head, I think anything that requires changes to structs or APIs requires that registries adopt them, and that, like, if you provide a fallback, the fallback risks just becoming the de facto standard, I think, and that's not what anybody really wants, right? So as I think everybody here is aware of that, like we want to try and avoid that. That's the meta concern. The second one is, like, in terms of how registries are structured and how they store and link data together, changing that for big registries is a non-minor thing. So adding different ways that things can reference each other or whatnot does add complexity. And even things like adding tons and tons of tags is problematic, just in terms of, you know, list tag APIs and things like that were not designed to be queried a lot. I guess the discussion here went more towards the, so proposal D was the idea that you have a manifest list or an OCI index that you add things to. So essentially the digest of the object changes as you sign it. And the discussion, I guess the key point there is, should digest change or not when signatures are added? There are probably use cases for both, but are there existing structures like OCI indexes we can use instead to reference things and tags as a mutable thing to appending signatures onto the same object or something else? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Thomas, you can explain better otherwise.
I guess the question I'll have on that when you're saying that you want to see the digest change and you're trying to figure out should it change is, what are we signing at that point? Because I think right now all the signatures we've been doing so far have been on that digest.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a good point. Like, what are you signing? You can sign anything. you just have to define exactly what you want to sign. So you could sign a JSON object containing references to other things. You could sign a single digest, you know, as one thing. But Thomas is probably better at explaining the other issues.
Yeah, I guess like where this discussion went was again to this fundamental question of like basically what is the definition of the image. So is the definition of the image the image container bits and the signature, or like I think in your definition it's more like that the image is only the container bits and then like the signatures are all external. And that was kind of like the reason, as far as I understand, why you moved on from proposal D was because like this digest change didn't really fit without your use cases that much. While if you look at like some of the Docker use cases, like they're much more aligned to having this image that we can already like basically like the thing you see in Docker images, it's already signed, it has attestations and so on. It's not just like that. It doesn't. The container bits in there are just part of this image, and like there's some discussion in there where it went to with like some of the practical examples today as well, like that like there's some images out there that have like tons of signatures because they're just like reproducible images and stuff like that, and while like logically they should only have one signature in my opinion, because like that, or like at least that was the user intention, I believe. And yeah, and the question of like what do we sign there, I guess like the only practical way to do it with like without introducing any new object in the registry is to sign the descriptor in the image index. Like I don't see any other like practical ways there. And like in this issue, I think we had like some kind of like clean way to do this with like nesting image index. Turns out that like the runtime support for this is like kind of flaky. Like some runtime support some stuff, some of the like the older ones do not. So like that's kind of like a question in there as well, like how cleanly it can be done. But yeah.
So I think like the point about nested indexes, luckily, like this is the OCI, and we can also specify how nested indexes should be handled and roll out like enforcement of that, or at least like, you know, conformance tests for that.
Just a comment, but in the spec, it is, like, I think it's worded as should, like that nested indexes should be supported, but we see in practice that's not really implemented everywhere at the moment.
Right, not only like words in a spec, but also conformance tests, and that way we can guard against future behavior. Like for instance, I mean, I'm surprised to learn that it says anything about nested indexes. Who is the smart person that thought of that even? That's nice. But even like discovering an image in a deeply nested index, is that breadth first? Is that depth first? Is it like, I don't even know how. I assume two container runtimes come up with a completely different answer for that, and therefore everything explodes. So that's I think a big reason why we have shied away from that. But if there are folks at Docker and folks in the runtime space that are interested in resolving that and having that be more uniform, then that reopens that possibility, I think. I think there's still sort of a conceptual, I think we had all prior to this discussion sort of tacitly agreed that like Alpine is one thing. Like, well, it's an image index of n things, but it at least like the container bits are the thing we want to sign, or at least talk about. And so like when I sign it, it doesn't modify the thing. Sajay can sign the same thing that I signed, and they're not, the order of those signings doesn't matter. It's not that Sajay is signing my signature of the thing or my wrapper of the thing with containing my signature, et cetera, et cetera. That it's sort of like the layer bits and config bits sit there and quote unquote are the image. And then I say that image is good, or that image contains this, or that image is, you know, whatever. So it's definitely like a conceptual, you know, sort of expanse to say now we're going to say maybe, or at least consider like the image might actually mean the image plus my signature, or the image plus whatever I say about it. Not that it's a bad thing, it's just a new frontier in the discussion. That's all.
Yeah, the comment I was going to add to this was, I think what you're looking at is saying we should just have it all as one index here. And the discussion on D, when it got to that part, really did focus on that makes sense when you're the image originator. But it doesn't make sense when you're extending this down the road, just because of our concerns with changing the digest everywhere and how much we see workflows that are really dependent on that digest not changing. When you look at signing solutions, the signature is based off of that digest not changing on the image. When we look at people that are making these deployments in a production environment, they're grabbing that digest and comparing across to make sure nothing changed, because they want to make sure that they're deploying the same image that was built somewhere else and that nobody modified it in the middle of that. So I'm very sensitive when we get to the point that we start changing this, just because I worry that there are a lot of user workflows that are dependent on that digest not changing on us.
This is like a little bit written on the issue as well, like that. Yeah, like sometimes you may have these flows where you kind of like want the digest to change, but there could be like different flows as well, where it's actually when you have different components that need to understand, like when the image changes, for example, like at the moment, like they can react to the cases where your container bits change. For example, like somebody pushes or changes file, like a component can react to it, but on the same time, like with this model, they can't react to it, like an attestation changes or something like that. While like I think you can come up with flows where like that would be useful as well. And in those flows, like it's important for the digest to change, or like at least it's important for like a component to understand that this image has been updated. It's now a different thing than what I checked previously.
I'd like to dig into that a little bit. I think it is possible for a system to discover new attached, in either of the forms, either the tag fallback form or the refers form. The same system that would be, sort of polling what the latest tag points to see if its digest changes. That same system could also be querying tags to look for new attestations, or query refers to look for new attestations, etc. So maybe I'm missing something about that point, but
I mean, currently there's also like what's missing is that you can't really like understand like what attestations were a part of the like a specific image build or something like that. Like for example, like we have those digitalized images out there. They have tons of signatures. Like which one of the signatures is the correct one now? Like, and like if I would imagine that at the moment they don't have attestations, but in some point they will have attestations, and they will have like 34 different attestations, and like what's the connection with like, because like actually only one of them is the valid one.
well, I think that's sort of a conceptual difference too, right? Because it's so reproducible, there might be 50 different workflows that produce the same digest image, right? That's like a feature of Distrolist that is possible. So I get what you're saying about like, now do I have to scan all those attestations to see if any of them were produced using a vulnerable dependency or something? That definitely is complicating, but I don't think that that's necessarily a misfeature of a reproducible.
Yeah, I don't think it's like too specific to this image. Like I would expect, like even like with like current like simple release pipelines, like if you're like, for example, I'm doing releases from my repository. I'm also doing like nightly builds and like master branch builds. Like often like master branch builds and nightly builds will not have binary bits change. So, but then like when I'm looking at my release or something like this, I don't want to see that like, okay, like this image, like it has some kind of attestations for the master builds and like nightly builds as well. Like that's not relevant to me at all. Like if I'm just looking at like what's the version 1 or something like this.
So, I mean, this is addressed in one of the use cases where we want to know what was the latest thing that was appended to a container image. So what was the latest signature? We don't want the whole list of attestations. We just want the latest one. So proposal C was supposed to handle that, and I think that we left proposal C alone because that had problems with garbage collection.
I think it has problems if you don't use indexes. There was an amendment in one of the meeting notes, which I think fixed that.
Yes, so we do use indexes, but in that proposal, we also use references. So, and then the references could be ordered if someone wants to indicate that, if you want to just get the latest thing, then get the latest, then get the first element or the last element of the list.
Going a bit back, I don't necessarily think that this notion that like the last signature is important is like necessarily the correct one, because like there are valid cases where you want 2 signatures, right? Because you want like signatures from 2 different roles, but you don't want like some other like person in the random role signing a different image that happen to have the same container bits. You don't want this signature to also become like part of images, at least in our use cases. Like there's different ways to look at it, of course.
Right. So the specific use case that I'm thinking about is chain of custody. This is one of those things that like very regulated environments would like to have. So in those situations, you want to you want to maintain the signatures and the attestations of every person that touched that contributed to building the artifact. So you can track chain of custody. So I don't know, any thoughts on that use case?
I think it's a valid use case. I think you wouldn't necessarily need to do that. I don't think in a chain of custody, you don't only care about the latest link, you care about each link. So even in that case, it's not, you could do that with either a signature or an attestation that says, I'm Jason and I held this image from X to Y time, and then I handed it off to Brandon and he held it from Y to whatever.
Right, but how do you track that besides, I mean, that's the way that you track it, is you say like, okay, here's Jason's stamp. Now he occurred at this timestamp. Now it's Brandon's stamp, and it occurred at this time. And if you want to verify that, you say, okay, let me verify whether this matches Brandon's ID. Okay, that matches Brandon's ID. Now let me check if it matches Jason's ID, and so on and so forth. So it's the verification when you hand over something that's important.
Yeah, I think in like the model that we had in mind would have been that once you hand it over, they will add a new signature on it, and it will like conceptually become a new image that replaces the old image with a new signature. So that's a different from.
Yeah, it's a different thing. But it doesn't really match. It doesn't really match what at least from what I am seeing, what Oracle's customers are asking for. That's not what they want. They want to verify each one of it. They don't want to just trust you.
No, I mean, like, that's what I meant, that like the image is already signed. Someone will come in and they will add their signature in a different role. Now the new image replaces the old image. The new image will now have two signatures. So now when I'm like pulling this new image in, I can verify that this image has been signed by two roles, and like
I see what you're saying.
It passes the policy. The difference is that when in our model, when you add the second signature, then you're basically like modifying an image. You're making like a shallow copy of it. That's like 99% of it is the same, but the digest has changed. While in the current one, like basically you're saying that the image is just like the digest of the container bits, and like whoever adds like rows to images that happen to use the same container bits, they all are put together in the same group, and then like you can just see like you don't know how many builds were made, but those builds share the container bits, and this is like a collection of all the signatures that are made to this collection of images.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that the indication that something new was added to that chain of custody is the different digest of that index.
Correct.
I see Brandon's had his hand up for a while. Sorry, I'm not running the meeting, but
No, a couple of us have. Jason, I think you had it before me.
You can go ahead. I've talked some.
Yeah, so I think earlier one of the comments that you had, Tonise, was that you were worried about having a lot of these other things that were just pushed by whoever had that digest and was pushing content. And one quick point I wanted to make that wasn't my main point was that these people still need write access to your repository. You're not getting around that. And so it's going to be someone that's got, the ability to push this data up to your repository. If you want to separate something like your nightly builds from your releases, I assume you're probably going to want to push like an annotation into your manifest that says, hey, this is our release manifest. And then you're going to get a new digest by doing that. It might still point to the same underlying layers. All that stuff might stay the same, but you can still have a new manifest with a new digest that new content pushes to. So those were a couple of small side points to think about. But the bigger one that I really wanted to push for was I think you've got a vision for what you want to see done. And I think it might be easier to discuss that if we just went ahead and put a proposal F out there and create the proposal and say, here's our vision for what we want to do, because what you're proposing isn't just proposal D, because D actually said, okay, this is only when we do this for the originator, and we're still pushing digest tags, and we still have this other path in there to do things that weren't digest. And it explicitly wasn't going into the mutating the same index over and over again. It was trying to avoid that. And so I think you've got something far enough along in terms of your vision for what it looks like. I think it would make a lot of sense to get that proposal out there and really go through all the different requirements that we have and see how your proposal handles those requirements, and whether, that what makes sense for us in terms of, are we concerned about any of the requirements that doesn't hit? Thoughts on that? I know I'm giving you guys more work, but would you be
Yeah,
open to putting that?
yes, you can. We can do this, and you can give me more points of like what the differences are, so that I don't miss anything. But and it's also like I think why we haven't done this is that because like there's all these moving parts like that. Like, is there like an extra tag that like could point to the sign manifest? So because like there's some use case for it, then it's like, what do you put in annotation? Like, do you put like, do you like inline the signature there, like what we might be also interested in? But like all of those parts are kind of like flexible. So like I don't think we would have wanted to just like put all our stuff in there, saying that like, no, we don't like the extra tags, and the signatures need to be inlined and stuff like that, because like these are all like just like up for discussion, and like
I think that's
all
fine.
like in the independent parts.
We've had that in other proposals too, where people say like, this sort of like is the bones of the proposal, and this is like a thing that if it happens, great, and if it doesn't happen, it's not like the end of the world. Or we would prefer to have signatures inlined, but if people find a reason not to, it's not like we have to make a proposal G that's everything except that part. So I wouldn't be worried about it.
Definitely has stuff that comes in that says this part is still to be determined. Let's discuss this area. This is where we want to focus on.
Yeah. I wanted to, Brandon, for the record, I totally agree. That's, I think, a good idea. I wanted to bring up a case that I think is illustrative of the issue I think I have with considering a signature plus an image as a new image with a new digest. And it's that, let's say that there is a really bad vulnerability in Alpine digest ABC, like, or, Alpine 316.1 has a bug, and right now 3161 is ABC. There is, as far as I know, there is no way to get that information and figure out whether my signed wrapper around that points to that same image, unless you use the nested manifests. Nested manifests would solve this, but then you have a bunch of runtime problems. Maybe we can solve that. But I think that's the issue with proposal D, fundamentally, with the adding new manifest digest and manifest descriptors to the index, is that I can tell that my image contains, or my index contains, all the same images as Alpine vulnerable version, but I can't tell if it is the same thing, or I have to do a deep inspection to see if all of the blobs in the layers are the same to be able to tell if it's the same.
So I mean, you need to verify all the descriptors like individually. You can't just have like one master signature that that you check.
If signatures
to confirm the whole like multi-platform image, basically.
Yeah, if signatures are outside the image and the image digest doesn't change, it is a trivial operation to tell whether I have the vulnerable Alpine version.
That's for the multi-platform. It's like there are multi-platform vulnerabilities, but it's quite possible you'll actually have an ARM-only one. So it's probably better to compare, or like, for example, Windows and Linux images can be shipped together, right? So there's a chance that the Windows one will be vulnerable, but the other one's not. So it's probably better to check the actual digest for the image manifest, not for the index.
Sure. So instead, I still have to discover, I have to crawl that index manifest to find all the vulnerable images. Potentially, there's probably one vulnerable image. You're right. There's probably not a lot of multi-arch vulnerabilities.
But you have to crawl the registry anyway, right? Because you're trying to work out which tags or which things contain that element. So for example, if I have my image built on top of the Alpine image or something like that, there'll also be some crawling that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to have to be a reverse scan of a lot of things in terms of what things use these layers. It's not going to be trivial to implement.
Yeah.
Only there was an annotation for what image your image is based on. So
If only there was an API that could reverse tell you that this thing was referenced by another thing.
I believe Justin Cormack has ideas for an OCI v2 that's graph based, and I think everybody would love that. I think that's the yeah.
I mean, yeah, sure, let's do it. Proposal G.
Yeah, rewrite everything, start from scratch, burn it down.
So isn't proposal C a graph-based thingy? And we didn't want to touch garbage collection, and so we
Yeah, I mean, I
left
think
it alone.
yeah, I think the general, I mean, the reason that Chris and I think we're chuckling about it is that it's a sort of a boil the ocean type of problem, right? Like, sure, wouldn't it be nice if there was a graph-based OCI v2 that trivially handled all of these issues, but you know, now you have the rollout problem. I think that was roughly the feedback on proposal C was like,
Yeah.
this is, you know, this is great. We would all love this. However,
Mhm.
like, you actually have to convince like 15 different vendors to get on board with it. And
Yeah.
that's your hard problem, not your technical hard problem, but your like people hard problem.
Yeah.
There was the inside the notes from 29 March, a discussion on like C is actually, if you squint, kind of an index. I think that could be a way of handling it.
Yeah, C very much was saying, and I'm putting words in your mouth, Nish, only because you're too busy taking great notes, that it was saying, okay, we've got this index, but we want to do enough changes that we should also version the spec. And so it was looking at what decision points do you make in terms of when you version the spec. So that was where we kind of came out with that difference. But I think you can also look at and say the other way of maybe we don't need a version of the spec, turn it into an index, and then we're closer to what you're talking about.
I mean, that my standpoint, as I said at the beginning, is like, if either, like, ideally we change nothing just because then it just works, or and I think in parallel we should look at building out a V2 from the learnings we've got and thinking about how we can get people towards that. But that's, you know, that's like a 5-year project. That's not something we're going to solve now. Anything in between kind of feels like a we're going to get stuck in the current fallbacks or things like that.
I'll stress that it needs to be V3 because we're at V2 right now. So you get a new version number.
You know, versioning's fun. You should confuse people every time.
We're going straight to version 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with the point about if there is a fallback mechanism, just because of inertia, the fallback mechanism tends to become the mechanism. I think that's a bit, we've had that discussion in a few different ways. I think that's why, so like proposal E is pretty good, I think, because it addresses the fallback problem. You don't have to update your registry to get these nice benefits. But over time, as registries pick up support, assuming registries pick up support, maybe they never do, and we get a pretty good fallback. As registries pick up support, then nice things get to be a little easier.
I think we pushed enough features in E that registries will also want to upgrade. At least that's our hope, is that registries don't want to see people hitting their tag interface like this and querying a whole bunch of manifests to get all the data out of it.
Yeah, I think that came up in the issue comment. The issue comments too was like, the fallback works, but will cause undue stress on registries. And the solution for the registries is, hey, we've already specified the correct fix, and here's how to do it.
Yeah.
This is all optimistic, you know.
If you don't like us hitting your API with the tags and then querying every manifest that comes back in that tag listing, then all you have to do is add this new API and we won't do that anymore.
Yeah, but they will probably react by rate limiting and giving people a crappy experience or something like that. So yeah, eventually they may.
That problem too. Yeah.
Yeah, that is one of the downsides of the implementation that I put out there, is I actually made the query for the manifest in the fallback scenario an option. So I don't pull back all the annotations in the initial query unless I pass an extra option that says actually go out there and fetch all those manifests to pull those up. So there's not a great answer there for either side unless we do the upgrade. But I think that's kind of our hope, is that we get to that point. Cool. Anything else on this? Or I think the big action item is, Chris and Tonis, if you want to throw up a proposal F, I think we would be very interested in looking over that. It's easy. I think it's easier for us to discuss with something written down on paper. Cool. I had a few other things. I'm just being cognizant of time. I want to make sure we actually save some of the stuff there for the end there. So I had a few other that were quick. OCI changes. Do we need any layout changes needed? That came from when I was looking through some of the ZOT stuff. When I was going through some of the code there, I saw a comment that was like, hey, maybe we should talk to the working group about what this looks like. And I was thinking the same thing when I was pushing this stuff into an OCI layout. Originally, when I was looking at proposal E, I was thinking just push the tag into the layout the same way I'll push any other tag in there. And then I could just do the tag queries back and forth. Perhaps we want to think about, does it make sense to add some other fields into that layout spec? And then we can just query those instead, and it makes it a little bit nicer. Something to think about. I'm guessing that might just be something that Josh and I are interested in. I'm not sure if other people are.
Yeah, I think once it's at that point, it's a server-side implementation detail, but the actual Go struct for the layout should perhaps just include refers also, if we're going to go that way.
It becomes a portability integration, because I see these layouts being used not just for internals of ZOT, but also being passed back and forth as we're moving these artifacts around on sneaker nets. So something to think about. So I'm just raising that up as a little conversation point for thinking going down in the future. Another one I had in there was, should the query response that we're talking about in the refers API, should that be index, or do we need a new media type for that one? And that kind of came from a comment that Justin had on the PR a while back that I don't think many people saw, just because it was already on a merge PR. But the question came up, we're pushing back this response, but it's on a query. It's not an actual index. It's a generated index, so that you can't really trust the digest of that. And so I'm not too picky on either way of that one, but I kind of wanted to make sure the question was visible to people to know that there were concerns as to whether or not that should be an OCI index versus making a new media type for the response. And if that's something people want to change, I'm cool with that. So those two are getting some wheels turning. Feel free to chime in, ping me afterwards, that kind of stuff. Like I said, these were kind of quick things because I do want to save time for stuff at the end. The last one, there is an open issue out there for renaming everything we are calling with a reference to call it like refers, something like that. The idea being that we've got a reference already out there. Distribution uses that whenever you're converting like this whole, Alpine latest into whatever you're querying, that is a reference right now. And so we're already using the term reference everywhere else to mean that thing that is like an image name translated kind of. And so I wanted to disambiguate and make sure we weren't reusing the same terms for our stuff, because that would just get even more confusing. So I propose refers. If people want to propose another term, feel free to throw that over in the issue. Otherwise, if you don't speak, we'll probably just keep renaming stuff, and it gets harder and harder to undo later on. And that was my quick rapid fire. So I mentioned I was trying to get through so we could get to the more interesting discussions there. So Josh, you had the proposal E upgrade scenarios, and I think that's where we want to spend the most time on this.
Can you see my browser?
We can.
Okay. So one of the things about proposal E, so we have started going down the path of like starting to validate it, because it seemed up until recently that it was where we were headed. But I opened up this PR yesterday, number 49, with adding some content to the upgrade doc. And And basically, and this is a little silly, and if this is not helpful, I won't be offended. I won't be offended. But I'm trying to think about, I was talking to Brandon about what are like the different components here. And you have producers, registries, and consumers that are not going to upgrade to these new things at all. And so I just wanted to put like some sort of like evolution, kind of showing the evolution of these types of clients. So the tree is like a client that can do all the things on the producer side, and the beaver, I couldn't find like really good emojis for this, but basically like these are all, now we have like a table of all the different combinations of between registries and clients on each side of the equation. And what I wanted to do is with the forks that we have, and this is this page, see if we could play through these scenarios and see that they actually work in the way that we expect them to. So right now I have Brandon's reg client as both the beaver and the tree, the crane fork as the squirrel and the branch, and then the distribution fork as the motorcycle, and then distribution on main as the bicycle. And so I wanted to basically spend some time and fill out these to-dos and make sure that we could push things in all forms and make sure like all the fallback scenarios work. That's pretty much it. This is up on the PR, and kind of like what needs help reviewing is, do these descriptions make sense to people as far as what's going to work and how it's going to work? Anything else, Brandon, that I am missing with this?
Find the mouse so I can find the mute button here. The other big thing is the bold was this cases that we really want to consider supported. And there are some things down there where we didn't bold because we're going to say those are cases that we just don't think should be supported anywhere. So in terms of an upgraded producer that's talking to a registry and it's trying to push an artifact spec and the registry hasn't been updated, we expect the registry is going to throw that back and say, I don't understand this manifest type, so I don't know how to load this into the registry, you're getting rejected. And similarly, that one other case down there where you might have a client that only knows the one scenario there where it knows the back version, so the squirrel version instead of the beaver version. So if your consumer only knows image spec and your producer is trying to push the new artifact media type, then the consumer won't know how to read that. And so I think that's kind of an obvious case where there's going to be a challenge, but it's just something to keep in mind, as that might be another one of those issues. Upgrading everything else should work in these scenarios or have nice fallback situations.
And so the squirrel can hit the new API, but it doesn't understand the new manifest, correct?
It wouldn't know the new manifest, so it wouldn't know how to pull down and parse apart that manifest. Hopefully they're not going to be clients that go in that path. Hopefully clients are going to go from not knowing anything to knowing everything. But it's possible someone would only configure their client to know the image spec, and then that is a scenario that I wanted to keep in mind.
That's all I really have. I'm wondering if the 10 minutes are better spent since we have a bunch of people here talking about something else. Or if like for the Docker folks, like, you know, is there any other like general concerns with the working group, or like, you know, I want to make sure that is the things that Docker is trying to solve in alignment with the working group anyway?
I think some of it, it's basically, I mean, we were also interested in how we attach metadata being things like SBOM or signatures to images. At the same time, we're also worried about what are the data structures that get stored in inside registries. So, you know, for if other tools are adopting things, or if the OCI is pushing for standardization, we want to make sure that it's that we think it makes sense as well. I think in terms of the like where things are attached. Sorry, Thomas.
Finish up.
Just in terms of where things are attached, I think there is definitely a discussion here about should they be attached to the root object or should they be detached, and that's a thing. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the definition of the root object. That's I think is the most fundamental thing. From like just like looking at the proposal E as well, like yeah, like definitely like we don't, if there is this new API, like Brandon showed, like does this fancy lookups, like this will, I don't know if this fits our requirements from like from the backward compatibility side. And like if you look at like there's some tagging scheme there as well, like from the backward compatible stuff, right? Like but they're supposed to do like the list of tags like on every pull or like every verification. So I think from that side, one of the issues is purely like performance for us, because like we want if we want this to be not like an opt-in thing that's like only used rarely, but like really like integrated into like Docker flows, then it needs to be like very snappy and like and almost like moving from like unsigned images to signed images shouldn't like make user experience worse. So like I would see that if I need to do a pull and I need to like do it like a tags list in there as part of my commands, I think this is just like too slow in lots of cases, and it's it could be like breaking from that side already. And of course, like that brings back to that as well, that like we don't want like arbitrary signatures to be there that will also slow things down. And so like there is a performance side, but we're also like concerned there.
Yeah, I definitely hear the performance concerns, right? I think GCR is also involved in these discussions. ECR is also involved in this group. Like every registry doesn't want to support something that's going to make it impossible to like performantly handle these queries. If there is, I mean, that leads me to believe that in all these prototypes and stuff we build, we should also keep an eye on performance, right? Like, so we can reg client list the artifacts, but can we do it quickly, and what's the load on the server at the same time? You did mention one thing I wanted to also talk about, which was, so like there are 34, 38 signatures on the distroless image. Docker pull shouldn't have to verify all of them in order to pull that image, right? There should be some policy. Maybe the default policy is to verify them all, or the default policy is to verify none of them, and then you have to like incrementally add things you start to care about. I don't know. That turns into a sort of product type of discussion, but I don't think you should verify every signature by default as a first cut, because like you said, it's a lot of extra work both on the client side and the registry side to serve all of those manifests, and it doesn't really tell you anything else. Like I don't care if Josh signed my image. No offense, Josh. I don't care if Josh signed it. He's not one of the people that I consider authoritative about this image, or when I'm going to pull it into staging, I don't care that it's not signed by like the prod rollout gatekeeper, because it's not time for that yet. So I think there's a lot of cases where you don't, both for performance and because it doesn't tell you anything, you don't have to verify every signature.
Yeah, I think that makes sense in like if you think about this in the case of like I have like my deployment policy or like whatever, like the policy for like the next change that's happening in the supply chain. But like if we just want to make it like as part of like Docker flows, then I think yeah, like I think we need to verify and pull. And like then the question is like what do we show there to the user? Like we want to show there that like this image was signed. It was like, for example, like signed by my email address, like my email address was verified by like the Sigstore or whoever, and like I want to print this out. But like, let's say like now that we have 30 signatures, like how do I pick like which one of those is correct? Like I imagine, or like I agree that like showing this 30 signatures to user is pointless as well. Like they have nothing to do with this. But like, how do I know which one is the correct one? Which one do I show it there? And the same thing with like, if the image is signed, probably like in Docker image ls, you want to see that this image is signed, like this is like more trusted image, this is what you should use. If I do go to inspect it, it should show me like probably something like cosign tree does. Like it shows me like these are the signatures, these are the attestations, and but there probably I need to show all the signatures, because again, like how do I verify which ones are important and which ones are not? And I don't think this cosign tree does this at the moment, but I think like when we show that this is signed by like those certificates, we need to also verify the signature. Like otherwise, like it's like it could be like misleading information.
Yeah.
So it depends on like lots of the flows as well. Like I understand that there are flows where you're like you have very strict requirements. Like I require one signature from this role, then the workload is okay. But there's also like flows where we just need to understand like what's going on. We should need to show like what's the like properties of this object and stuff like that, where this optimization can't be done so easily.
Yeah, so in general, we're trying to collapse a non-binary state of is this signed or not, down to a binary state of is it signed. Like meaningfully, like there are 38 signatures that mean individually, many things, and you just want to show a checkbox in the like Docker images ls that says yes, signed, right? You could have a policy. You could say your policy is it must be signed by someone that I like, someone that means something, someone that whatever means something means. You could also just say as the default like fallback policy of did anyone sign this? Is any name attached to this as a person who knows about this image? Then you don't need, in that case also, you don't need to verify everyone. You go until you find one that's verified and then you stop. So maybe you only verify one signature in that case. That's differently bad than like having a policy that requires a user to define that policy. But fundamentally, we're trying to take those 38 signatures and boil it down into a checkbox. And I think that's a really hard problem, no matter how we like cut it, right?
Yeah, I'm sure Sajay and I are thinking back to all the discussions we've had on the notary side about how do you define a policy and how do you define this is what we want to check to see that we are verifying this thing. And there are going to be different scenarios. Each user is going to have a different scenario they have. And hopefully the common scenario is just that I see a signature from a person that I trust. If I see it, we're done. And hopefully that's the first signature you check. You check one, you're done. And you don't have to go through all 30 of those. And that's, I think in the scenario we're thinking of where you have a reproducible builder that's just re-sign on every reproducible build. I think that is that case over there where it's the same signer is just doing it every time it runs it on a different environment or something like that. And it just gets the reproducible build of that thing. You're seeing the same thing come back over and over again from the same signers that you trust.
Yeah, Tian, on your question of signatures are also scoped to the namespace in repo. Yes, they are. So again, you'd only have signatures for people that can push to that repo. I think in Distroless's case is pathological, but something we should support well anyway, which is that the way that Bazel builds them, it has like build these dependencies and tag it as Debian 11, and then build these dependencies and tag it as Debian, 11.1 or whatever the scheme is. And it just so happens that those are all reproducible so that it ends up building and tagging and signing for each of those tags, which is a little silly, but Bazel's a little silly.
In addition to adding all those signatures on there, the other nice thing is the ability to delete things that you see that you no longer need. And that's a lot easier to do if they're isolated independent things. You can see, okay, I already pushed a newer version of this out there, so I can delete that old signature.
Yeah. Brandon, your example of a reproducible build that isn't silly like Bazel, but saying like, I built this yesterday and got these bytes. I built it today and got these bytes. I'll build it tomorrow and got the same bytes. That's useful signal because you're getting like, it is reproducible. Look, I got from the same source at 3 different times. Bazel's thing is not signaling that, it's signaling that it tags weird, but.
The more valuable one to me is if we get two completely different disparate builders that both came up and said, we both built this thing, builder A and builder B, in a completely separate secure zone. And they both did that. And so that's where I'm thinking there are policies out there people are going to want to see, make sure builder A and builder B both sign the same digest.
Yeah, that's the kind of policy that you really want, is to say like the West office and the East office both built it and they came up with the same thing. Don't deploy it unless it does, unless that is the case. But yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting questions around what the default policy should be, or what the default, when you pull a random image from Docker Hub, what do I need to know about it to know that it's safe? Like at first, nothing's going to be signed. So there has to be a policy of like, no signatures is okay, or else no one will ever use it.
Yeah, backwards compatibility has also been very key on our priority list. And so making sure we don't break existing container runtimes that don't even know about signing, don't even know about any of the stuff we're doing, that's been very high up on our list. But with that, I think we're already starting to run over on time. We've already lost a few people. So no, all great discussions. Any last comments before we call it a week?
Thank you for joining us, Docker folks. I know I said this before, but like your input and experience is going to be really valuable here. So thank you for taking the time. And sorry for assigning you homework.
They'll never come back again.
We're not a very big team. We have a lot going on, but we appreciate that people are listening as well. We know we're coming in late as well. So yeah.
Better late than never. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Have a great week.